You're listening to Rebel Spirituality with me, Sam Goldfinch. Here's the truth. Wisdom doesn't follow rules. So each week we're going to explore what it means to wake up your way so you can live a more peaceful, creative and inspired life no matter your circumstances. It's time to blaze your unique path to truth. Hey friends, so I just recorded a whole podcast on Do We Need Morals? And for whatever reason, because of my settings, I literally sounded like Darth Vader. And I did, for a moment, consider releasing it, but then I decided it was actually quite strange. So here I am recording it again, so we'll see what comes out. And I really didn't expect to be recording this podcast today. You know, sometimes I have a bunch of ideas in my head as to what it is I want to talk about. But I certainly didn't think, I'll record a podcast on morals. Do we need them? Are they valuable? And all that kind of stuff. But for whatever reason, it's something that's coming up in a bunch of podcasts I've been listening to recently. And yeah, I wanted to kind of put something together. And I have a feeling this will evolve over time. But I thought it was an interesting question for us to consider. So I Googled morals. And, you know, there's the meaning of this word, which is kind of the moral of a story, kind of the lesson or the learning that we take from something. But today I'm more interested in the second definition that's here on Google, which is standards of behavior, principles of right and wrong. And, you know, do we need standards of behavior? Do we need basically a set of rules as to how we live so that we behave correctly? And it strikes me as an interesting question, because even right now, if you were to take a tour around the world, you would stumble across all sorts of different interpretations of what is right, quote unquote, and what's wrong, you know? And that's fascinating. You know, we can literally be in one state in the US and move to somewhere else and it looks totally different. You can move from one country in Europe and pop next door and it looks totally different. And who's to say that one group of people has it right and one group of people has it wrong? And of course, there are places in the world that are much more secular in the sense that they've separated church and state. And so sort of religious morals are less influential, although I would imagine that a lot of the ways that we think about right and wrong have to some extent been influenced by religion wherever we happen to find ourselves in the world, different religions, of course. But do we need that? Like, do we actually need a guidebook? Do we need to outsource these ideas and have a way to live? And I'm kind of curious about that. Like, it seems to me that at the center of so much of the behavior that's troubling, that many people would say, well, we can't run a society if people are running around doing that. Like, we can't have a society where people are running around abusing each other or where crime is high. And so I'm certainly not suggesting that there's no hierarchy of sort of ideas of like, well, that's a good idea and that seems like less of a good idea. You know, if everybody's just running around nicking things from each other, and we're not going to get that far, it would seem to me anyway. But where does that come from? Where does that knowing come from? And at the root of it seems to be this misunderstanding, this not knowing that most people are operating under, of their wholeness, of the fact that they are truly inherently whole, that there is nothing that the world of form can add or take away from them at the deepest truth of who they are. Now, there's wonderful things that the world of form can bring us, all sorts of experiences and fun times, and I'm certainly not against any of that kind of stuff. That sounds awesome. Like, why not enjoy those things? But in a world where I feel like I'm not enough, in a world where I feel like I'm lacking something, it just seems logical to me that I'd be more likely to try and get that from somebody else, or to take it from somebody else, or to feel jealous of what somebody else has. And in a world where I know I'm inherently whole, it seems that I play the game differently. It seems that there's a source of wisdom I can tap into that's going to help me and guide me. And I wonder whether we need these concepts, this dualistic concept of right and wrong in that world. Like, as many of you know, the entire of Rebel spirituality is underpinned by this foundational idea that wisdom doesn't follow rules. And to me, that's not an idea. It looks to me like it's a truth, actually. It's a spiritual fact, as Sid Banks would have called it, and many other people would have different terms for that. And in that, it doesn't look to me like that there's a list of actions that are wrong and a list of actions that are right. Like, it doesn't take much, it's not much of a thought experiment to imagine one situation where a certain behavior seems really kind of counterintuitive to love and compassion and understanding. But in a different scenario, that same action may look different, in terms of self-defense or something like that. So, and I wonder if we can we outsource those ideas? Like, I know for sure that there have been times in my life where I have kind of done that a bit. I've been in some kind of ism. You can think of any of them. There's plenty of words that end in the word ism, and those spaces, those subcultures are often dogmatic. They tend to tell you how you need to think, or they tell you the way that you have to approach things. And I think for many of us, we kind of innocently outsource what we really think and feel to those structures. But the world's adapting and changing like really, really quickly. You think about the advent of AI, you think about how quickly culture is changing and the world is changing and all these different things. Surely we need something more than a list of ideas as to what's right and wrong. We need to be able to tap into an inner knowing that's guiding us. And I think that takes real courage and real bravery actually to do that. And I'm not suggesting for a second that many of the knowings, if you like, that come from a space like that, like, if judgment falls away and we find ourselves in a space of love and compassion, it seems that many of those things that show up are, I don't know, they're just kind of central to a functioning culture and society where people are respected and people get along. And that many of the things, if we get tangled up in our mind and this idea of separateness and not enoughness, then many of the things that come from that are not, I guess, kind of helpful if we want to build a loving and understanding society. So it's not that there isn't a mapping of many of those things. I guess for me, it's more of a question of where's it coming from and do we need those? So central to, I guess, my work, if you want to think of it in that way, is waking people up to the fact that they are inherently whole, so they come to understand who and what they really are, and then see what changes in light of that. And this just seems one of those areas where, maybe we don't need morals in the way that we thought we did. But I'd love to hear from you. It'd be really, really interesting to hear from you. I guess that this might be quite a charged topic in some ways, but I just kind of wanted to share from the heart. Like, maybe I'd see it differently on a different day. Like, as you know, I often update ideas. I've started doing that recently as well. So there was a podcast recently about, how feelings aren't transactional, and it was an updated podcast on something that I'd shared maybe a year before or 18 months before. And I want to keep kind of sharing how I see things, because it doesn't look to me like, well, those things change, right? We see something in a certain way one year, and then time passes, we have a bunch of insights and something looks different to us. So it's important to me that I update things as we go along. So who knows what this will look like to me in the future. But I just think it's a wonderful way to live, to be able to kind of tune into that inner knowing and follow that, rather than getting caught up in all of the noise in our head. And with so much conflicting information and so many different ways of living and so many different people telling us, well, this is the right way and that's the wrong way, I wonder where else we've got to turn at this point. Like, I think we've spent way too much of human history outsourcing our ideas to, these people in power that have all of these ideas. And I'm not for a second saying that it's not a good idea to have, a form of kind of societal organization and government and all that kind of stuff. That's not my point. But I think at the personal level, we need to turn inward and look for a different way of relating to life, which will, of course, then flow outward into those organizational structures, as far as I can tell anyway. And I also realize that some of this stuff might sound like hippy-dippy nonsense, and I think it needs to be ruthlessly practical. But if we reflect on our life and we think about how that realization of, oh, there is somewhere I can look within that's kind of guiding me, that's massively practical for how we live our lives. So I see no reason why that isn't already massively influencing the world and culture and our countries and all that kind of stuff. Awesome. Right, well, there we go. I hope you have a great day. Didn't expect that I had no idea how that was going to come out, and that's how it came out. So I look forward to hearing from some of you. All right, team. Big love. See you soon.